Detective Sarah Martinez was halfway through her Sunday evening dinner when her cell phone erupted with a sharp, urgent ringtone reserved for emergency calls. She glanced at her partner Miguel across their small kitchen table, his fork suspended. Midway to his mouth, marinara sauce dripping back onto his plate. They both knew that sound meant someone's worst nightmare was just beginning. "Martinez," she answered, already reaching for her badge and service weapon from the counter. "Detective, we have a missing child situation at 2847 Maple Ridge Drive." In Highlands Ranch, came the dispatcher's voice, crisp and professional, despite the gravity of the words. 3-year-old Emma Lawson, blonde hair, blue eyes, last seen wearing a red polka dot dress and white sandals. She disappeared during a family gathering approximately 30 minutes ago. Sarah's stomach dropped. In her 12 years with the Denver Police Department, child abduction cases were the ones that haunted her sleep and followed her home. She grabbed her keys, kissed Miguel goodbye, and was out the door before he could wish her luck. As her unmarked sedan raced through the suburban streets, she mentally prepared for what awaited her. The Lawson residence was a picture of American suburbia turned nightmare. The 2-story colonial home with its pristine white picket fence and manicured lawn was now surrounded by police cruisers, their red and blue lights painting the gathering darkness in ominous colors. Crime scene tape fluttered in the evening breeze like yellow ribbons of despair. Sarah could see the silhouettes of family members clustered on the front porch, their voices carrying fragments of panic and disbelief across the yard. "Officer Jenny?" Rodriguez met Sarah at the gate, her usually steady demeanor showing cracks of concern. "Detective Martinez, thank God you're here. The situation is complicated. We have approximately 40 family members who were present when Emma disappeared, and the timeline is extremely narrow." Sarah surveyed the scene with practiced eyes. The backyard was a testament to a perfect family gathering, folding tables laden with half-eaten barbecue, colorful balloons tied to chair backs, and children's toys scattered across the grass. An inflatable bounce house sat deflated in one corner, while a swing set occupied the back portion of the yard near a wooden privacy fence. "Talk to me, Rodriguez. What do we know for certain?" The parents are Mark and Lisa Lawson, both 32, no criminal history, solid marriage by all accounts. They were hosting a family reunion. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins from both sides. Emma was playing with her cousins near the swing, set around 3:30 p.m. At 3:47 p.m., Lisa called for Emma to come inside for cake. When she didn't respond, Lisa went looking, found Emma's red dress and sandals by the back gate, but no Emma. Sarah felt the familiar chill that accompanied every parent's worst fear. Security cameras? That's where it gets interesting. The Lawsons have a home security system with cameras covering the front and back entrances. I've already pulled the footage. Rodriguez led Sarah to a laptop set up on the patio table. "Watch this." The grainy security footage showed Emma at 3:47 p.m., a tiny figure in her bright red dress, skipping toward the back gate while carrying what appeared to be a stuffed animal. She paused at the gate, looked back toward the house once, then appeared to be talking to someone outside the camera's range. The next frame showed the gate standing open, swaying slightly in the breeze. Emma was gone. "Jesus," Sarah whispered. "How long between these frames?" 18 seconds. Whoever took her knew exactly what they were doing and how to avoid our cameras. The sound of approaching vehicles made Sarah look up. A white K9 unit was pulling into the driveway, followed by additional patrol cars. She recognized the dog. Handler immediately, Officer Jake Reynolds, a 10-year veteran whose German Shepherd Rex had one of the best track records in the state for missing person cases. Jake emerged from his vehicle, Rex at his side. The magnificent German Shepherd was alert and focused, his dark eyes scanning the scene with an intelligence that never failed to impress Sarah. She'd worked with this team before on several cases, and their success rate was remarkable. "Jake, thank God you're here," Sarah called out. "We need Rex's nose on this one." "Already briefed on the way over," Jake replied, his weathered face grim. 3-year-old. Disappeared 30 minutes ago. Found clothing by the back gate. Rex is ready to work. Sarah watched as Jake prepared Rex for the search. The dog's transformation was immediate, from companion to working professional in seconds. His ears perked forward, his body language became focused and intense. Jake held Emma's tiny sandals in front of Rex's nose, allowing the dog to memorize her scent. "Rex, such," Jake commanded in German. "Find her." The German shepherd immediately put his nose to the ground and began working the scent trail. He moved methodically across the backyard, his powerful shoulders rippling as he worked back and forth in his search pattern. Within minutes, he had located Emma's strongest scent trail leading directly to the back gate. Rex's body language changed dramatically as he followed the trail beyond the gate and onto the sidewalk. His tail went rigid, his pace quickened, and he began pulling Jake toward the street. The trail was hot and fresh, and Rex was locked onto it with laser focus. But then, at the intersection of Maple Ridge Drive and the busy thoroughfare of County Line Road, something devastating happened. Rex circled frantically, whining and looking up at Jake with confused eyes. The trail had vanished completely, as if Emma had simply disappeared into thin air. "Vehicle," Jake announced grimly to Sarah, who had been following close behind. "Someone picked her up right here." Rex lost the trail completely. It only happens when the subject gets into a car or truck. As if summoned by their worst fears, the sound of helicopter rotors began echoing overhead. Channel 9 News had arrived, their spotlight cutting through the gathering darkness like a mechanical search beacon. Within minutes, the quiet suburban street would be swarming with reporters, curious neighbors, and the crushing weight of media attention. Sarah looked at her watch. 8:23 p.m. Emma Lawson had been missing for nearly 5 hours. In child abduction cases, the first 24 hours were critical. But Sarah knew the real truth that statistics couldn't capture. Every minute that passed made their chances of finding Emma alive exponentially worse. The nightmare was just beginning. Dawn broke over Denver like a reluctant witness, painting the sky in muted shades of gray that seemed to mirror the collective despair hanging over the Lawson household. Detective Sarah Martinez hadn't slept. She stood in the incident command center that had been hastily erected in the Lawsons' garage, surrounded by maps, photographs, and the constant buzz of radio chatter. Coffee cups and empty energy drink cans littered every surface, testament to the all-night effort that had yielded heartbreakingly little. The transformation of the quiet suburban neighborhood was staggering. What had been Maple Ridge Drive 12 hours earlier was now a hive of coordinated chaos. News vans lined both sides of the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like electronic prayers. Reporters stood ready with microphones, waiting for any scrap of information to feed the hungry news cycle. "Martinez, we've got the volunteer coordinators setting up at Highlands Ranch Community Center," announced Sergeant Tom Bradley, his usually pristine uniform wrinkled from the sleepless night. "They're expecting over 200 searchers by 8 a.m. Sarah nodded, her eyes burning from fatigue and stress. Through the garage window, she could see Mark and Lisa Lawson sitting on their front porch, holding each other in stunned silence. They looked like they had aged a decade overnight, their faces etched with a pain that no parent should ever have to bear. Officer Jake Reynolds appeared in the doorway, Rex panting beside him. Both looked as exhausted as Sarah felt, but she could see the determined fire still burning in Jake's eyes. Rex's usually pristine black and tan coat was dusty from hours of searching, but his alert expression showed he was ready for more work. "Sarah, Rex picked up something interesting about an hour ago," Jake said, his voice hoarse from calling out Emma's name throughout the night. We were working the perimeter again when he alerted near the drainage culvert system that runs under County Line Road. The scent trail was faint, but it was definitely there. Could she have crawled through the drainage system? Sarah asked, though even as she spoke the words, she knew it was unlikely. The culverts were too small for an adult to traverse, but a frightened 3-year-old might attempt to hide there. That's what we thought initially. Rex tracked the scent for about 50 yards through the tunnel system before it led us back up to street level near the old industrial complex off Highway 85. That's where things got really interesting. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The industrial area was a maze of abandoned warehouses, storage facilities, and forgotten businesses, the perfect place for someone to hide a kidnapped child. "Show me on the map." Jake spread out a detailed topographical map of the area, his finger tracing Rex's route. "Here's where we lost the original trail last night. The drainage system runs underground for almost a mile, emerging here near the Trans-Logistics Warehouse complex." Rex picked up Emma's scent again right at the tunnel exit, but it was older, maybe 6 to 8 hours old by the time we found it. The warehouse district. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. It was isolated, largely abandoned, and had dozens of hiding places. More importantly, it would provide cover for someone who wanted to stay invisible while keeping a captive child. "Have we got surveillance footage from any businesses in that area?" Sarah asked, already reaching for her radio to coordinate additional units. "That's the problem," Jake replied grimly. "Most of those businesses have been closed for years. The few that are still operating have either no cameras or systems, so old they don't actually record anything. But here's what's got me thinking. Rex's behavior changed dramatically when we got to that area. He wasn't just following a scent trail anymore. He was actively hunting." Before Sarah could respond, her radio crackled to life with an urgent transmission. All units. We have Channel 9 news helicopter reporting possible movement in the warehouse district off Highway 85. Unit 7, respond immediately." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. "Jake, get Rex in the truck. Bradley, I want every available unit converging on that location now. And get me the FBI liaison on the phone. If Emma's there, we're going to need all the help we can get." The drive to the warehouse district took 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours. Sarah's police radio was alive with reports from the search teams now spreading across the industrial complex. The area was larger than she had remembered. Dozens of buildings spread across nearly a square mile of cracked asphalt and overgrown weeds. Rex was out of the K9 unit before Jake had fully stopped the vehicle. The German Shepherd's nose went immediately to the ground, and within seconds his entire body language shifted into high alert. His tail went rigid, his ears pricked forward, and he began pulling Jake with an urgency that made Sarah's blood run cold. "He's got something strong," Jake called out, allowing Rex to lead them toward a cluster of rusted shipping containers and abandoned trailers. "This is different from last night. This scent is fresh." They moved through the maze of industrial debris like a tactical team, Sarah with her service weapon drawn, Jake allowing Rex to guide their path. The morning sun cast long shadows between the buildings, creating a dozen hiding places where danger could be lurking. Rex stopped suddenly at the entrance to what appeared to be a makeshift camp hidden between 2 storage containers. Cardboard had been arranged to form walls, and Sarah could see evidence of recent habitation: empty food cans, a sleeping bag, personal belongings scattered about. But no Emma. "Someone's definitely been living here," Sarah observed, photographing the scene with her phone while calling for the crime scene unit. "Jake, Can Rex tell us if Emma was here? Jake gave Rex the command to search the area more thoroughly. The dog worked methodically through the makeshift shelter, his powerful nose analyzing every scent molecule. When he reached a pile of old blankets, he sat down and looked directly at Jake, a signal that he had found Emma's scent. She was here, Jake confirmed, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Recently, within the last few hours. Sarah felt a mixture of hope and terror. Emma had been here, which meant she was alive as of a few hours ago. But she was also clearly being moved around by someone who knew these industrial back roads well enough to stay ahead of a massive search effort. All units, we have confirmation that the victim was in the warehouse district as recently as this morning, Sarah radioed to the command center. Expand the search perimeter to include all abandoned structures within a 5-mile radius. And get me those FBI resources now. We're dealing with someone who knows exactly what they're doing. As if summoned by her words, Rex suddenly alerted again, his nose pointing toward the western edge of the complex, where a cluster of abandoned warehouses stood like silent sentinels against the morning sky. His excited whining told Sarah everything she needed to know. Emma was close. And after 16 hours of hell, they were finally closing in. The warehouse district stretched before them like a concrete graveyard, each building a potential tomb, holding their worst fears. Detective Sarah Martinez felt sweat beading on her forehead, despite the cool morning air as she watched Rex work his way methodically through the maze of abandoned structures. The German shepherd's behavior had shifted again, from the excited alerting of moments before to something more focused, more urgent. His nose swept back and forth in tight patterns, and his whining had taken on a pitch that made Sarah's skin crawl. Talk to me, Jake, she whispered into her radio, not wanting to disturb Rex's concentration. What's he telling you? Officer Jake Reynolds studied his partner with the intensity of someone reading a life or death message. He's locked on to something strong. The way he's moving. This isn't old scent anymore, Sarah. This is immediate. She's here. Somewhere very close. The industrial complex seemed to swallow sound, creating pockets of eerie silence broken only by the distant hum of highway traffic and the occasional crackle of police radios. Sarah counted at least 15 buildings in their immediate vicinity, some little more than corrugated metal shells, others substantial brick structures that had once housed thriving businesses. Any one of them could be hiding a terrified little girl. Rex suddenly broke into a run, his powerful legs carrying him toward a cluster of storage units at the far end of the complex. These weren't the large warehouse buildings they'd been searching, but smaller, individual units with roll-up doors, the kind people rented to store furniture or seasonal decorations. Most appeared to have been abandoned years ago, their doors rusted shut or hanging askew on broken tracks. Unit 7 to all units, Sarah called into her radio, converging on the storage facility at the northwest corner of the complex. Possible hot zone. As they approached the storage units, Sarah could see that several had been broken into over the years. Doors hung open, revealing emptiness or scattered debris. But Rex wasn't interested in the open units. He was pulling Jake toward a section where the doors were closed, his excitement building with each step. The storage facility was arranged in 2 long rows with a narrow alley between them. Rex led them down the alley, his nose working overtime as he processed the complex mixture of scents, rust, decay, oil stains, and something else. Something that made him whine with increasing urgency. 3 units from the end of the row, Rex stopped so suddenly that Jake nearly tripped over him. The German shepherd sat down and stared intently at a blue roll-up door that looked slightly different from the others. While most of the doors showed years of weather damage and neglect, this one appeared to have been recently disturbed. Fresh. Scratches marked the concrete where it had been raised and lowered, and the padlock, while rusty, had clearly been opened recently. "Sarah," Jake's voice was barely a whisper. "He's giving me the strongest alert I've ever seen from him. If Emma's anywhere, she's behind that door." Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her service weapon as she studied the storage unit. The silence was oppressive, broken only by Rex's excited panting and the distant sound of backup units approaching. She could hear voices now, other officers spreading throughout the complex, checking every building, every hiding place. "Denver. Police, is anyone in there?" Sarah called out, her voice echoing off the metal buildings. "Emma? Emma Lawson?" The silence that followed was deafening. But then, so faint it might have been imagination, Sarah heard something that made her heart skip. A tiny whimper, barely audible, coming from behind the blue door. "That's her, Jake." Breathed, Rex now standing and pawing at the door. "That's definitely her." Sarah radioed for backup and the specialized entry team, but every second felt like an eternity when a child's life hung in the balance. The padlock was old but solid, designed to keep casual intruders out. She studied the door mechanism, looking for the fastest way to get inside without potentially endangering Emma. "Ma'am, step away from the door." The voice came from behind them. Harold Vega, a thin man in his 40s, with unkempt gray hair and clothes that spoke of too many nights sleeping rough. He had emerged from behind another storage unit like a ghost, his hands raised, but his eyes darting nervously between Sarah and the door. "Denver police. Keep your hands where I can see them." Sarah's weapon was out and trained on Vega in less than a second. "Jake, keep Rex focused on that door." "Sir, I need you to get on the ground, hands behind your head now." Wait, you don't understand," Vega protested, his voice shaking. "I was trying to help her. I found her wandering around here yesterday, crying and lost. I've been taking care of her, giving her food and water. I was going to bring her to the police station this morning, I swear. Get on the ground now." Sarah commanded, but her attention was split between the suspect and the storage unit where Emma was presumably being held. Rex had begun barking. Now sharp, urgent barks that seemed to communicate the immediacy of the situation. More patrol units arrived, their sirens wailing as they surrounded the storage facility. Sarah could hear officers taking positions, their voices coordinating. The tactical approach. But all of her focus was on that blue door, and the tiny whimper that had come from behind it. "Ma'am, I have the key," Vega said, pulling a small key from his pocket while remaining on his knees. "Please, just let me open it. She's scared enough already. She doesn't need to hear the door being broken down." Sarah made a split-second decision that would haunt her for weeks afterward. "Slide the key toward me, slowly. Any sudden movements and you'll be eating concrete." Vega complied, sliding the key across the oil-stained pavement. Sarah kept her weapon trained on him, while Jake scooped up the key and moved toward the storage unit door. Rex was practically vibrating with excitement, his whole body focused on what lay beyond that barrier. The key turned easily in the old padlock. Jake raised the door slowly, revealing the darkness within. As sunlight flooded into the storage unit, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. There, huddled in the far corner behind boxes of old furniture, was Emma Lawson. The 3-year-old was clutching a torn teddy bear to her chest, her blonde curls matted and dirty, her red polka-dot dress replaced by an oversized t-shirt that hung on her tiny frame like a tent. But most devastating of all were her eyes. Wide, vacant, staring ahead with a 1,000-yard stare of someone who had seen too much. "Emma, sweetheart, we're here to take you home," Sarah said softly, holstering her weapon and moving slowly into the storage unit. "Your mommy and daddy are waiting for you." But Emma didn't respond. She didn't even seem to see them. She sat motionless, silent, locked somewhere deep inside herself, where the terror couldn't reach her. Rex whined softly and lay down outside the storage unit, as if understanding that his job was done, but something much more difficult was just beginning. As paramedics arrived and carefully lifted Emma from her makeshift prison, Sarah looked at the broken little girl and realized that finding her had been only the first challenge. Bringing her back to the world would require a different kind of heroism altogether. 6 months had passed since that devastating morning in the storage facility, but for District Attorney Robert Kim, the case felt as fresh and frustrating as day one. He sat in his corner office overlooking downtown Denver, surrounded by towers of case files, psychological evaluations, and legal briefs that painted a complex picture of justice deferred. The Lawson case had become the most challenging prosecution of his 15-year career. A legal puzzle where the key piece, Emma's testimony, remained locked away behind walls of trauma-induced silence. Emma Lawson had not spoken a single word since her rescue. The medical reports spread across Kim's mahogany desk told a story that broke his heart every time he read them. Dr. Amanda Chun's initial psychological evaluation described a child so deeply traumatized that she had retreated completely into herself. Selective mutism, severe anxiety disorder, night terrors, and what Dr. Chun delicately termed dissociative episodes, moments where Emma would stare blankly ahead, completely disconnected from the world around her. "She's in there," Dr. Chun had assured him during their last meeting. "The Emma who existed before this happened is still in there. But she's protecting herself the only way a 3-year-old knows how, by not engaging with a world that proved it could hurt her so terribly." Across town, Harold Vega sat in the Jefferson County Jail, maintaining his innocence with the persistence of either a truly wronged man or a master manipulator. Kim had interviewed him personally 3 times, studying the man's weathered face and searching for cracks in his story. Vega's account never wavered. He had found Emma wandering near the warehouse district, crying and lost. He claimed he had taken her to the storage unit to keep her safe, while he figured out how to contact authorities without getting himself in trouble with the law. "I've got warrants, you understand," Vega had explained during their first interview, his hands shaking slightly as he spoke. "Nothing violent, just unpaid fines, probation violations. I was scared if I walked into a police station, they'd lock me up and no one would know about the little girl. I was going to call anonymously, I swear. I was just trying to keep her safe until I could figure out what to do." The evidence against Vega was frustratingly circumstantial. His fingerprints were on the water bottles and food containers found in the storage unit, but that supported his story of caring for Emma. Security footage from nearby businesses was either non-existent or too grainy to be useful. The storage facility had no surveillance cameras, and the unit had been rented with cash by someone using a fake name months earlier, long before Emma's disappearance. Kim's phone buzzed, interrupting his brooding. "Robert, it's Maria Santos," came the voice of Vega's public defender, a sharp woman with 20 years of experience defending the indigent. "We need to talk about a plea arrangement." "I'm listening," Kim replied, though he already knew what was coming. "Harold will plead guilty to child endangerment and unlawful detention. He'll take 5 years, serve 3 with good behavior. In exchange, you drop the kidnapping charges." Kim felt his jaw clench. "Maria, we both know your client didn't just stumble upon Emma Lawson. The timeline doesn't work. She disappeared from her backyard and somehow ended up in a storage unit rented with a fake name. That's not coincidence." "Prove it," Santos shot back. "You've got a traumatized child who can't testify. Circumstantial evidence that equally supports my client's version of events, and a prosecution built on assumptions. Take the plea, Robert. It's the best you're going to get." After Santos hung up, Kim walked to his window and stared out at the bustling city below. Somewhere out there, Emma Lawson was sitting in Dr. Chun's office, playing with dolls and drawing pictures, still trapped in her silent world. Her parents had aged years in the past 6 months, their marriage strained to the breaking point by the trauma of almost losing their daughter and the frustration of watching her struggle to return to them. The intercom on Kim's desk crackled to life. "Mr. Kim, Dr. Chun is here to see you." Dr. Amanda Chun entered the office like a small hurricane, her usually perfect professional demeanor showing cracks of exhaustion and determination. She carried a manila folder thick with drawings, therapy session notes, and psychological assessments. "Robert, I think we might have a breakthrough," she announced, settling into the chair across from his desk. Emma's been making progress in art therapy. She started drawing scenes that clearly depict her abduction. Chun opened the folder and spread out a series of crayon drawings across Kim's desk. The images were disturbing in their childlike clarity. A man with angry eyes, reaching toward a small figure, a dark box with a tiny person curled inside, tears falling like rain from stick figure faces. "This one is particularly significant," Chun said, pointing to a drawing that showed a large dog with a badge on its collar. "She's been drawing Rex repeatedly. The police dog seems to represent safety and rescue in her mind. In our sessions, she becomes noticeably calmer when Officer Reynolds brings Rex to visit." Kim studied the drawings, seeing both hope and heartbreak in the innocent artwork. "Has she shown any signs of being ready to talk about what happened?" "That's why I'm here," Chun replied, her voice taking on an urgent tone. "I want to try something unprecedented. I want to bring Emma into a controlled courtroom environment with Rex present. Not to testify. She's nowhere near ready for that. But to see if being in the space where justice happens, with her symbol of safety nearby, might help her process what occurred. Amanda, that's..." Kim paused, considering the implications. The defense would object to any kind of courtroom exposure before trial. They'd claim we're coaching her or attempting to influence her memories. I'm not talking about testimony. I'm talking about therapy, a new approach to helping her heal. But Robert, if we're going to try this, we need to be prepared for the possibility that she might speak. And if she does, Kim felt his pulse quicken. If she does, we'd have our witness. More than that, Chun said softly, we'd have Emma back. The question is, are you willing to take the risk of going to trial with what we have now, knowing it might be our only chance to get justice for her? Kim looked at the drawings spread across his desk, a child's attempt to make sense of unthinkable trauma. In 6 months, Harold Vega would either be convicted of kidnapping or walk free on a lesser charge. But more importantly, Emma Lawson would either find her voice again or remain trapped in silence forever. The decision that would determine both their fates was his to make. The Jefferson County Courthouse had never seen anything quite like the media circus that descended upon it on the morning of October 15th. News vans from every major network lined the street, their satellite dishes creating a technological forest against the autumn sky. Reporters clutched steaming coffee cups and checked their equipment one final time, preparing to broadcast what legal experts were already calling the most compelling child witness case in Colorado history. Judge Patricia Williams adjusted her black robe and took a steadying breath as she reviewed her notes one final time. In 32 years on the bench, she had presided over murders, complex fraud cases, and high-profile divorces, but never had. She felt the weight of responsibility more heavily than this morning. The courtroom beyond her chambers was packed to capacity with reporters, legal observers, victim advocates, and members of the public who had followed Emma Lawson's story from the beginning. District Attorney Robert Kim sat at the prosecution table, his usually confident demeanor showing subtle signs of the stress that had consumed him for months. Beside him, his lead prosecutor, Janet Morrison, arranged her files with the methodical precision of someone who knew they were about to fight the legal battle of their careers. The case they were about to present was built on circumstantial evidence, expert testimony, and the desperate hope that somehow, someway, justice would prevail. Across the courtroom aisle, Public Defender Maria Santos conferred quietly with Harold Vega, who sat in his ill-fitting borrowed suit, looking more like a confused grandfather than an accused kidnapper. Vega's hands trembled slightly as he sipped water from a plastic cup, his weathered face showing the strain of 8 months in county jail. Santos had built her defense on reasonable doubt and the power of alternative explanations, a strategy that had served her well in previous cases, but had never felt more crucial than it did today. The gallery was a study in contrasts. Mark and Lisa Lawson sat in the front row, directly behind the prosecution table, their hands intertwined so tightly their knuckles had gone white. Lisa's sister sat beside them, having flown in from California to provide support. Their faces showed the strange mixture of hope and dread that came with finally having their day in court. On the opposite side, a small group of homeless advocates sat quietly, including Father Michael Rodriguez from St. Vincent's Shelter, where Vega had occasionally sought meals and a place to sleep. They believed in his innocence with the fervor of people who had seen society's forgotten members wrongly accused too many times before. Judge Williams entered the courtroom at precisely 9 a.m., her authoritative presence immediately commanding silence from the packed gallery. The rustle of clothing and shuffling of papers ceased as everyone rose to their feet. "Be seated," Judge Williams announced. "We are here today in the matter of the people of Colorado versus Harold Eugene Vega, case number CR 20241-847. The defendant is charged with kidnapping in the first degree, a Class 2 felony, and child abuse resulting in serious bodily injury, a Class 3 felony." As the judge read the charges, Emma's parents felt each word like a physical blow. The clinical language of the legal system seemed inadequate to describe what their daughter had endured. The nightmares, the therapy sessions, the heartbreaking silence that had become their new normal. Jury selection had taken 3 grueling days, finding 12 citizens who hadn't been influenced by the extensive media coverage had proven nearly impossible. The final panel consisted of 8 women and 4 men, ranging in age from 24 to 67, including 2 parents of young children who had initially been dismissed, but were ultimately seated after extensive questioning about their ability to remain impartial. Kim rose for his opening statement, his voice steady despite the butterflies churning in his stomach. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about the most precious thing in our society, the safety of our children. On July 8th of last year, 3-year-old Emma Lawson was playing in her family's backyard when she vanished without a trace. For 4 agonizing days, her family searched desperately, not knowing if she was alive or dead." He walked slowly toward the jury box, making eye contact with each juror. "The evidence will show that Harold Vega deliberately and systematically stalked this family, chose Emma as his victim, and took her from the safety of her home to a hidden storage facility where he held her captive. The evidence will show that Emma's silence isn't just trauma. It's the silence of a victim who experienced something so terrifying that her young mind shut down completely to protect itself." Santos rose for her opening with equal gravity, but a completely different narrative. "Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution wants you to believe that my client, Harold Vega, is a monster. But the evidence will show something very different. Harold Vega is a man who has struggled with homelessness and addiction. Yes, but he is not a predator. The evidence will show that Harold found Emma Lawson wandering alone and afraid, and that everything he did was an attempt to protect her until he could safely return her to her family." She gestured toward Vega, who sat with his head bowed. The prosecution's case is built on assumptions, not facts. They want you to believe that because Harold was homeless, because he lived on the margins of society, he must be guilty. But having nowhere to call home doesn't make someone a criminal. And being poor doesn't make someone dangerous. As the opening statements concluded, Kim felt the familiar mixture of confidence and anxiety that came with launching a major prosecution. He had spent months preparing for this moment, but he knew that all their careful preparation meant nothing. If they couldn't convince 12 ordinary citizens to see past reasonable doubt and render justice for Emma, Dr. Amanda Chun sat in the witness waiting area, reviewing her notes and preparing for what would likely be the most important testimony of her career. Her evaluation of Emma's psychological state would be crucial to the prosecution's case, but she also carried the heavier burden of speaking for a child who could not speak for herself. Officer Jake Reynolds sat in the courthouse parking lot with Rex, both of them waiting to see if Judge Williams would allow the unprecedented courtroom appearance that Dr. Chun had requested. Rex seemed to sense the tension in the air, his intelligent brown eyes alert and watchful as courthouse security personnel discussed the logistics of bringing a police dog into an active trial. As the first witness was called to testify, everyone in that packed courtroom understood that they were witnessing something unprecedented, a trial where the most important witness might never say a word, where justice would have to be found in the spaces between silence and speech, between what could be proven and what everyone suspected to be true. The trial of Harold Vega had begun, and with it, the most complex search for truth that any of them had ever undertaken. Dr. Amanda Chun's testimony had been scheduled for the third day of trial, but nothing could have prepared the packed courtroom for what she was about to reveal. As she approached the witness stand carrying a thick manila folder filled with Emma's artwork, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Even seasoned reporters leaned forward in their seats, sensing that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Judge Patricia Williams watched as Dr. Chun was sworn in, noting the child psychologist's calm professionalism despite the magnitude of what she was about to share. In her chambers that morning, the judge had made the controversial decision to allow the presentation of Emma's drawings as evidence, despite vigorous objections from the defense that such materials were prejudicial and unscientific. Dr. Chun. District Attorney Kim began, his voice carrying the weight of months of preparation. Can you please tell the court about your professional relationship with Emma Lawson? I've been Emma's primary therapist since the day after her rescue, approximately 14 months ago. I specialize in childhood trauma and have worked with over 300 children who have experienced various forms of abuse and neglect. Dr. Chun's voice was steady, but those who knew her could detect the underlying emotion she worked so hard to contain. Can you describe Emma's condition when you first began treating her? Dr. Chun opened her folder, revealing the first of what would become dozens of drawings. Emma presented with severe selective mutism, meaning she had completely stopped speaking following her traumatic experience. She also showed signs of dissociative episodes, night terrors, and what we call frozen watchfulness, a state where traumatized children become hyper-alert to potential threats. The courtroom was silent as Dr. Chun displayed Emma's earliest drawings on an easel beside the witness stand. The images were heartbreaking in their simplicity: dark scribbles, angry red marks, and stick figures that seemed to cry tears of black crayon. These early drawings show Emma's internal emotional state, Dr. Chun explained. Children often express what they cannot verbalize through art. Notice the predominant use of black and red, the chaotic nature of the imagery, and the recurring theme of isolation. Maria Santos, the defense attorney, watched the jury carefully as the disturbing artwork was displayed. She could see several jurors visibly affected by the images, exactly what she had feared when she objected to their admission as evidence. Dr. Chun, Kim continued, Did Emma's artwork change over time? Yes, dramatically. Dr. Chun reached for a different set of drawings, these showing more structure and recognizable imagery. After about 6 months of therapy, Emma began creating more detailed pictures that clearly depicted scenes from her ordeal. The next drawing made several jurors gasp audibly. It showed a small figure with yellow hair hiding behind boxes. Wow! A large, dark figure loomed nearby. The detail was remarkable for a child so young. The boxes were drawn with careful attention to their shape and stacking, and the hiding figure's posture conveyed genuine terror. This particular image appeared repeatedly in Emma's artwork, Dr. Chun testified. She drew variations of this hiding scene at least 20 times over a 3-month period. Notice how she consistently depicts herself as much smaller than this threatening figure, which is typical of how children process encounters with adult predators. Harold Vega shifted uncomfortably in his seat as the images were displayed, his weathered hands clenched into fists on the defense table. His attorney placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, but Vega's face had gone pale as he stared at the child's interpretation of events he claimed never happened. Dr. Chun, Kim said, approaching what he knew would be the most crucial part of her testimony. Did Emma ever draw anything that depicted her rescue? Yes, and this is where her artwork becomes particularly significant for understanding her. Psychological recovery. Dr. Chun lifted a drawing that immediately caught everyone's attention. Unlike the dark, chaotic earlier images, this one showed a large dog with what appeared to be a badge or star on its collar, standing protectively beside a small yellow-haired figure. Emma has drawn Rex, the police dog who is instrumental in finding her over 40 times since a rescue. In her mind, Rex represents safety, protection, and the moment when her nightmare ended. Notice how she always draws herself standing upright when Rex is present, versus the crouched, hiding posture in the earlier trauma scenes. A courtroom stirred as people began to understand the significance of what Dr. Chun was revealing. Emma's artwork wasn't just therapeutic expression. It was a detailed chronicle of her experience, told in the only language she could manage. In your professional opinion, Dr. Chun, what do these drawings tell us about Emma's experience? Kim asked. Dr. Chun paused, choosing her words carefully. These drawings indicate that Emma experienced a prolonged period of captivity, during which she was forced to hide from a threatening adult figure. The consistency of the imagery, across hundreds of drawings, the specific details about the storage, environment, and the clear delineation between before, during, and after suggest that these are not fantasy images, but memories being processed through art. On cross-examination, Maria Santos fought valiantly to challenge the interpretation of the drawings, but Dr. Chun's expertise was unshakable. Dr. Chun, isn't it possible that these drawings reflect stories Emma heard about her disappearance, rather than actual memories? That's highly unlikely. The level of detail about the physical environment, the specific way the boxes are stacked, the texture she depicts on the walls, the spatial relationships, these are consistent with someone who actually experienced these spaces, not someone who heard them described. The defense attorney's final question carried a note of desperation. Dr. Chun, in 14 months of therapy, Emma still hasn't spoken about what happened to her. How can we trust artwork over actual testimony? Dr. Chun's response would become one of the most quoted moments of the entire trial. Ms. Santos, sometimes the most powerful truths are told without words. Emma has been testifying through her art for over a year. We just needed to learn how to listen. As Dr. Chun stepped down from the witness stand, she carried with her not just her professional expertise, but also the hopes of a little girl who had found a way to speak her truth through colors and lines when words had failed her. The drawings remained displayed around the courtroom like silent witnesses. each one a piece of evidence in the most important case of all their lives. Judge Williams called a brief recess, and as the courtroom slowly emptied, the artwork remained. On display, dozens of small windows into the mind of a child who had survived the unthinkable and was slowly, carefully, finding her way back to the light. The morning of the 6th day of trial dawned gray and overcast, as if the Colorado sky itself was holding its breath for what was about to unfold. Judge Patricia Williams had spent a sleepless night reviewing precedents and wrestling with the most difficult decision of her judicial career. At 6:47 a.m., she had finally signed the order that would allow 4-year-old Emma Lawson to enter her courtroom, not as a witness, but as Dr. Chun had carefully phrased it, as part of an in-court therapeutic observation session. The courtroom had been carefully reconfigured overnight. Child-sized furniture had been brought in and placed near the witness stand. Soft lighting had been installed to create a less intimidating atmosphere. Most importantly, a special area had been cordoned off where Officer Jake Reynolds would sit with Rex, positioned so that Emma could see the German Shepherd from anywhere in the room. District Attorney Robert Kim felt his hands trembling as he reviewed his notes one final time. The decision to bring Emma into the courtroom was an enormous gamble. If she became overwhelmed or suffered a psychological setback, not only would their case collapse, but they could cause irreparable harm to a child who had already endured more trauma than any person should experience in a lifetime. At 8:15 a.m., the courthouse was surrounded by an even larger media presence than usual. Word had leaked that Emma might appear, and reporters from across the nation had descended upon Jefferson County. Inside the building, extra security had been posted at every entrance, and the gallery had been limited to essential personnel, family members, and a small pool of reporters. Mark and Lisa Lawson sat in their usual front row seats, but today they looked different. Mark wore his best suit, the one he had worn to their wedding, while Lisa had chosen a soft yellow dress, Emma's favorite color. They held hands so tightly, their wedding rings pressed painfully into their fingers, but neither would let go. Harold Vega looked smaller somehow in his borrowed suit, as if the weight of the moment was physically diminishing him. His attorney, Maria Santos, had fought the court's decision to allow Emma's appearance until the very last moment, filing emergency motions that had been denied at 7:30 a.m. She now sat beside her client with the grim determination of someone preparing for the worst. At 9 a.m. sharp, Judge Williams entered the courtroom. The usual rustling and shuffling that accompanied her arrival was notably absent. The gallery sat in almost complete silence, as if everyone understood they were about to witness something unprecedented in American jurisprudence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Judge Williams began, her voice carrying unusual gravitas, "we are about to proceed with what the court is calling a therapeutic observation session. This is not traditional testimony. The child will not be sworn in, will not be questioned by attorneys, and will not be required to respond to any inquiries. Dr. Chun will be present at all times, and if at any moment the court determines that this process is harmful to the child, it will be immediately terminated." Dr. Amanda Chun entered through the side door first, followed by a social worker, and then, in a moment that seemed to stretch endlessly, Emma appeared. The transformation was startling. The hollow-eyed, silent child from the hospital videos had been replaced by a little girl who, while still small for her age, carried herself with a quiet dignity that moved several jurors to tears. Her blonde hair had grown back in soft curls, and she wore a yellow dress decorated with tiny white flowers. In her right hand, she clutched a small stuffed dog that looked remarkably like Rex. Emma's eyes immediately found Rex in his designated corner. The German Shepherd, trained for this moment, remained perfectly still but alert, his intelligent brown eyes tracking Emma's movement. For the first time since entering the courtroom, Emma smiled, a small, tentative expression that seemed to bring light to the entire room. Dr. Chun guided Emma to the child-sized chair that had been placed near the witness stand. "Emma, sweetie, do you remember where we are?" Emma nodded, her eyes still fixed on Rex. She whispered something so quietly that even the court reporter couldn't catch it. "Can you tell everyone what you just said?" Dr. Chun encouraged gently. "Courtroom," Emma said, her voice barely audible but clear enough that the enhanced sound system picked it up. It was the first time most people in the room had heard her speak, and the effect was electric. District Attorney Kim approached slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements that might startle her. "Emma, my name is Mr. Kim. I'm here to help keep people safe. Do you see anyone in this room that you remember from before?" Emma's head swiveled slowly around the courtroom. Her gaze passed over the gallery, the jury box, the court personnel, and finally settled on the defense table where Harold Vega sat, with his eyes downcast. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was actually less than 30 seconds. Emma's small fingers worked nervously at the stuffed dog in her hands, and Dr. Chun placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, sweetheart," Dr. Chun whispered. "Take your time. Remember, you're safe here." Emma stood up from her chair, still clutching the stuffed animal. She took 2 small steps toward the center of the courtroom, then stopped. Her breathing became rapid and shallow, and for a moment, Dr. Chun prepared to intervene. But then Emma's eyes found Rex again, and something changed. The German shepherd, sensing her distress, made a soft whining sound, not loud enough to disrupt the proceedings, but audible enough for Emma to hear. It was the same sound he had made when he found her in the storage unit, the sound that had meant rescue and safety and the end of her nightmare. Emma walked slowly but purposefully toward Rex, and as she did, every person in that courtroom held their breath. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the moment when justice might finally have a voice. But as Emma reached Rex and knelt down to touch his soft fur, what happened next would shock even those who thought they were prepared for anything. The little girl who had been silent for over a year was about to speak words that would change everything, words that would echo through the justice system and into the hearts of everyone who heard them. The courtroom waited, suspended in a moment between silence and truth, between trauma and healing, between a child's nightmare and the justice she deserved. Emma knelt beside Rex, her small hand disappearing into the German shepherd's thick black and tan coat. The courtroom had become a cathedral of silence, with over 100 people barely daring to breathe as they watched the tiny girl find comfort in the presence of her 4-legged savior. Rex remained perfectly still, his years of training keeping him motionless, despite every instinct telling him to comfort the child who had become so important to him. Dr. Amanda Chun watched from her position near the witness stand, her trained eye monitoring Emma's body language for signs of distress. What she saw instead was something remarkable. For the first time since her rescue, Emma's shoulders had relaxed completely. The hypervigilant posture that had defined her for over a year was melting away as she drew strength from Rex's steady presence. "Good boy, Rex," Emma whispered, her voice soft but clear in the absolute silence of the courtroom. Several jurors leaned forward, straining to catch every precious word from the child who had been voiceless for so long. "Good boy." Judge Patricia Williams felt tears threatening to spill from her eyes as she watched the scene unfold. In 32 years on the bench, she had never witnessed anything approaching the raw courage being displayed by this 4-year-old girl. Emma was facing her demons in the most public forum possible, and she was doing it with the quiet bravery of someone far beyond her years. Emma stood slowly, still maintaining contact with Rex's fur. She turned to face the courtroom, and for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, her blue eyes swept across the faces staring back at her. The jury, the gallery, the court personnel. Everyone waited as Emma's gaze moved methodically from person to person. District Attorney. Robert Kim felt his heart pounding so hard, he was certain everyone could hear it. This was the moment their entire case had been building toward. The moment when justice might finally have a voice. But he also knew that whatever happened next, it had to come from Emma herself. He couldn't coach her, couldn't guide her, couldn't do anything but wait and hope that somehow this broken little girl would find the strength to speak her truth. Emma's eyes continued their journey around the courtroom until they reached the defense table. Harold Vega sat hunched in his chair, his weathered hands folded in his lap, his eyes fixed firmly on the table in front of him. He seemed to be trying to make himself invisible, to disappear into the borrowed suit that hung loose on his thin frame. But children see things that adults miss. Emma saw the way Vega's hands trembled. She saw how he couldn't bring himself to look at her. Most importantly, she recognized him. The recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her body went rigid, and for a moment, Dr. Chun started to rise from her chair, preparing to intervene if Emma became overwhelmed. But then something extraordinary happened. Instead of retreating into the protective silence that had sheltered her for so long, Emma found her voice. "Bad man," she said, her small finger pointing directly at Harold Vega with the unwavering accuracy of absolute certainty. The two words detonated in the silent courtroom like twin explosions. Gasps echoed from the gallery, several jurors visibly startled, and the court reporter's fingers flew across her keyboard as she captured the moment that would be replayed in legal textbooks for decades to come. "Bad man," Emma repeated, her voice stronger now, carrying the conviction of someone who had finally found the courage to name her nightmare. Harold Vega's head snapped up as if he'd been struck. The color drained from his weathered face as he found himself face to face with his accuser. For a split second, his mask of innocence slipped, and everyone in that courtroom saw something that made their blood run cold. Guilt, recognition, and a terrible knowledge of being caught. No, that's not. Vega began to protest, half rising from his chair before his attorney grabbed his arm and pulled him back down. But it was too late. The damage was done. Emma's words had torn through 14 months of legal maneuvering, expert testimony, and circumstantial evidence like a knife through silk. Two simple words from a 4-year-old had accomplished what the entire justice system had been struggling to achieve. Judge Williams pounded her gavel as chaos erupted in the courtroom. "Order! Order!" she commanded, but her voice carried a note of awe at what she had just witnessed. Reporters were frantically scribbling notes and typing on phones, despite the court's prohibition on electronic devices. Emma, seemingly unaware of the pandemonium she had created, walked back to Rex and buried her face in his fur. The German shepherd, finally allowed to comfort his small friend, gently licked her cheek and made the soft rumbling sound that dogs use to soothe their pack members. Mark and Lisa Lawson were crying openly now, clutching each other as they watched their daughter display the kind of courage they weren't sure they possessed themselves. For over a year, they had wondered if they would ever get their little girl back. Now, in this moment of ultimate bravery, they realized that Emma had never truly left. She had just been waiting for the right moment to return. Dr. Chun approached Emma slowly, kneeling down beside her and Rex. "Emma, sweetheart, you did so well. You were so brave." Emma looked up at Dr. Chun with eyes that seemed older than her 4 years, but also clearer than they had been since her rescue. "He's the bad man, Dr. Chun. He hurt me." Those additional words, spoken quietly, but picked up by the courtroom's sound system, sealed Harold Vega's fate. The jury would deliberate for less than 2 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all charges. Vega would be sentenced to 25 years in prison, ensuring that he would never again have the opportunity to harm a child. But more importantly, Emma Lawson had found her voice again. In the weeks and months that followed, she would continue to heal, to speak, to reclaim the childhood that had been stolen from her. She would still have difficult days, still wake up from nightmares sometimes. But she had crossed a bridge that many trauma victims never managed to traverse. As the courtroom slowly returned to order, and Emma was gently escorted out by Dr. Chun, Rex walked beside them like the guardian angel he had always been. The German shepherd's work wasn't finished. He would continue to be part of Emma's therapy. A living reminder that even in the darkest moments, help could arrive on 4 legs with a badge on its collar. The trial was over, but Emma's real victory was just beginning. She had found her voice, spoken her truth, and in doing so, had not only secured justice for herself, but had shown the world that even the smallest voices can echo with the power of absolute truth. 2 words had changed everything. Bad man. 2 words that transformed a victim into a survivor, silence into testimony, and fear into the kind of courage that would inspire others for years to come.